Hi everyone, and thank you so much for joining our live stream today. My name is Kate Hateva, and I'm a founder of Career Pathway Institute. We are a nonprofit organization that helps internationals to build careers here in the US. Our main focus is dependent visa holders who put their careers on hold following their spouses. And most of them they can't work due to visa restrictions or other reasons, and they are facing such challenges as career gap, lack of industry knowledge, no relevant network, and cultural differences. And today we have a very special guest whose job is to help overcome all these challenges, boost confidence, and get unstuck. And it's a very frustrating situation when you're finally ready, you are ready to go get started to look for a job, but you're not getting any feedback. You're not getting invitation to the job interview and can't let the job for months. And of course, you are starting doubting your skills and asking yourself what's wrong with me and facing imposter syndrome. And today we will talk about how to navigate imposter syndrome while looking for a job. Please welcome our very special guest, Tatiana Sanikovic, who is an experienced HR director, a certified coach, and a facilitator. And her purpose is to ignite the spark of growth and fulfillment with individuals and organizations. And Tatiana combines insights generated from her 16 years experience in career in human resources and cultural development with her own extensive research and study in transformational practices in human potential. Thank you so much, Tanya, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's such a, well, first of all, it's such an honor. And then the topic, as you and I kind of touched base before setting this afoot, is it's such a relevant and hot topic at the moment. And hot in the way of it comes up in various ways, not just for those who've moved to another country and looking for jobs. So that's something that I'm definitely super passionate about and would love to speak today. Thank you for having me.
So let's start talking about imposter syndrome. So, what is that, and why it's so hard for international job seekers in the US?
So I looked at, as we looked in and I'm doing some research in imposter syndrome through work with my clients and just overall through my own experience, actually my personal experience and as an HR director, I looked up different definitions and I'm actually going to read one because there were several, of course. So I was like, I want to be precise, the one I really liked. It's a condition of feeling anxious and not experiencing success internally, despite being high performing in external objective ways. This condition often results in people feeling like a fraud or a phony and doubting their abilities. So what comes up in different definitions, it really comes up a lot with high achieving and high performing individuals. One thing about it is there's nobody exempt from it. However, in my work, and actually I looked at some research and studies, women are actually, they're doubling. Oh, it's lovely to see everybody. So they're double the percentage of women that at least express it or at least share it. So that's another piece we got to remember is that who is willing to, it's a very vulnerable space and very vulnerable information to share. And so who is willing to share that they are feeling it? But overall, it seems to affect women a lot more than men. And then KPMG did a recent study, and 75% of their executives, female executives, said they've all had it at some point of their professional lives. And so I like data to show that it affects particularly women, but it affects all of us from different walks of life and different cultural backgrounds. So it's real. It definitely is real. And so as you were asking me, what is it and why is it so hard? There are several things that I've noticed with international job seekers is that there are cultural differences. So I've been in the States now for 24 years, and all of my professional life has been in the United States. And so noticing the cultural difference of the biggest one is communication. Yeah. And how do we come across and how do we think we come across? How do other people perceive us? So that's a big piece, and also navigating the cultural terrain of the country that you're coming in that is an unknown entity and it's a big change, that's always that's a challenge to understand, and kind of surround yourself with people that can help you navigate. It's just like it's like when we came to school or at some point in kindergarten, when we come to different social setting, it doesn't matter if it's a new job or new country, new place, we're always navigating that new setting in the best way we can, which means we're trying to read explicit and implicit clues. How do I fit in this environment? And sometimes we do great, and sometimes we stumble. And I think for me, as a coach and previous in HR director, is that how can I give people tools to navigate it in a much easier, like emotionally actually way? How to understand the system to navigate it better. So that to me is a big piece. And then there's a couple of other things that I wanted to mention was language barriers. So language barriers, I find United States in terms of English as a language is a lot more acceptable than Europe and some of the European countries kind of that have immigrants that coming in. However, when you get to a certain level of the organization, I can't not mention that how people understand you and how clearly you communicate does determine kind of how well you're accepted or how easily you can lead. So the language comes in, particularly the comprehension and finding these nuances that I also work with. Actually, now somebody in Spain, and English is their primary work language, is navigating the business English, like finessing it, of what to say, what not to say, particularly as a leader, that people will be still inspired and will follow you, from that regard. So those are big things. And isolation and loneliness. So I really want to mention that piece is that when we move to another country, it is very easy to feel lonely and become isolated unless you find and you reach out community of like-minded people, at least somebody that you can resonate with. And so I think that your organization, which that's one of the inspiring pieces for me, is like, that's the support you provide. No matter, like, English is your binding language to everybody, but people come from absolutely different countries, is that this is where you find some commonality. You're all coming similarly at similar times or something. And so you can, that empathy, that really breeds empathy with each other, because you do understand where each person is, because each person is doing the same journey and very similar journey. So try not to get isolated, get out and connect with similar people, and maybe even not similar people, that you don't get this like very limited kind of view of how small the world is, because the world is pretty large.
That's so true. That's so true.
So those are some of the, we can keep going, but those are some of the big ones. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we already started to get some questions in the chat. Let me ask you one more question, and then we can focus on the questions in the chat.
That sounds great.
Well, when you give an example, the definition of imposter syndrome, you mentioned something very interesting, that mostly high achievers facing the imposter syndrome. So maybe you can give us some practical advice on how to recognize the imposter syndrome and fight with this syndrome while you're looking for a job, because it's very hard to deal with that when you need to deliver result like all the time. Like, I need to get this job. What to do?
Absolutely. One of the recognition piece is, as we speak about it, is, wherever you are in your life, you've come to this place based on the things you've made in life. You've created your life so far, and you're going to continue to do it. And if you move to this country, whether you moved as a spouse, it's still life that you're creating. So whatever you've achieved professionally, specifically, it's like you've made this happen. So that self-awareness, when you have questions creeping in, it's like, well, I'm not good enough, or, I'm not sure if I'm a fit for this job, is noticing. If you notice this is happening, that's the first step. Because when we don't have the self-awareness, when we don't have the awareness that something is happening, we won't be able to change it. So that's the first piece, is when you notice this. The second one, as much as some people might roll their eyes, is there is the part of the negative self-talk and the positive self-talk. And so the negative self-talk doesn't help at all. I can tell you that. It doesn't help in any situation, especially in imposter syndrome. However, culturally, I know I come from a Russian speaking culture. So I'm originally come from Belarus. It's a super negative self-talk culture, right? So that doesn't help as well culturally. And so everybody coming from their cultures, you know what your parents and society and everybody is saying around you. So turn it around. It's the positive self-talk. Notice the things you do well, and they don't have to be work related. Just notice that you smiled with somebody, you had a good conversation, you helped somebody else, right? You responded to a friend who lives here or doesn't live here, doesn't matter. You help somebody in the grocery store, or you actually got to the grocery store, got everything, figured out, made a meal, fed the family. You did great. We forget to acknowledge and appreciate those things about us because we were never taught that. So from now on, honestly, as much as it could be like fake it till you make it exercise, this is your task for all of you, is to, when you go through the day, notice the things you do well. I'm not like, I did this exercise myself several years ago when I would wash dishes and I would go to the mirror and be like, I did great. I washed dishes. I am really good today. And at first I was like, this is so crazy. Am I really doing this? But eventually the brain doesn't know the difference. It doesn't differentiate what task you're doing. But what it does differentiate, I'm rewiring my brain to recognize the things I do well, or I just do them and I don't pause to thank myself. So that's the positive self-talk and acknowledging. So that's another thing you can do. And then keep the record of achievement. So go through your life. That's the big piece. Yes, this exercise takes a minute. However, go through things, no matter how old you were, no matter what you were doing, and think of the things like that gave you joy and a piece of this aliveness when you really enjoy doing something. That means that is absolutely like your genius, that you don't think, oh, I'm good at this. It's like, yeah, because you love when that happens. Like, I remember running and leading a group of kids on the street. Like, we played a game where whatever, we ran. Now I look back and I go, oh, I always led a bunch of people, whether I was 10, 15, or 40, it doesn't matter. I walk in, I'm like, we're going to go this way. And everybody goes, sure. So notice that, but make a list. So when you're down on yourself, when that critic creeps in, and our critics are the hardest. We're the hardest on ourselves. We're the meanest, the hardest. So when that critic creeps in, you pull out a list. Like, there was a Tom and Jerry cartoon, I swear to God, when I was growing up, when he Jerry would pull out this like the scroll that Tom signed that he's not going to eat him everywhere they went for like the whole cartoon. It's kind of like that. You pull it out, you notice you've been critical of yourself. You pull it out and you go, here's the things I did do. All the certificates that you thought were relevant or irrelevant, all of the things you helped with, where you showed up, where you were proud and kind and helpful and resourceful and resilient, all of those things. So that's the part. Somebody's like, oh yeah, I can be really passionate, definitely, and super energetic, because it is very true. We are so critical of ourselves. Like, that's the worst. So that's the part. Those are a couple of things. Yeah. As you can see, I can go on and on.
And we already have really interesting questions. For example, how do you differentiate between high standards and imposter syndrome? That's a tough one.
Imposter syndrome is when what kicks in is you could have high standards, but then you go, but I'm not good enough for them. I can't achieve them because of X, Y, and Z. As opposed to, hey, here's my standard, and I'm just going to chip away at every step of the way. And when things don't go my way or how I would have liked them, where the perfectionist might kick in, because that's a part of imposter syndrome, is you go, I'm learning. All it is just a learning. And I just keep going and I go, but I still want to get there. So high standards, perfectionism can be hidden in high standards. So that's the part that a lot of times I try to work with my clients, but that's more of a personal work to go, what's behind it? Is it the high standard that makes sense? Or is it a high standard that's just there because that's all we know? Because we've always set this bar that we thought was a normal, and everybody else around be like, that's not quite normal. We're like, yeah, sure. But that's all I know. So that's a lot of us are the type A, or like the straight A students. If you look at it back, yeah, that's the typical archetype. So hopefully that answers. So the minute there's this doubt that you can't do it because you don't know, or something happened, or something else, then that's the imposter where you're questioning. That's the part that you want to pay attention to.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
Let's read more questions. Again,
Sure.
from Dasha. When it comes to mentorship and support, do you see gender breakdown differences in how male, female leaders put down or support the imposter syndrome in their mentees' subordinates?
These are great questions, Dasha. Thank you. I'm going to say yes. In my experience. So in my experience, overall, men don't associate with it as much as women. Therefore, not good or bad, the empathy or understanding is not as viscerally palpable as for females, really. So, particularly with imposter syndrome, to me, it's like, unless you've experienced it, it's really hard to understand. Something I want to tell everybody, and I try to deliver this. So there's been research in terms of applicants applying for roles. And it's been a while, but still, it totally is relevant, is and it's between genders, males and females. Overall, I can't tell you the country, but overall, in my experience, I definitely noticed that. When female reads a job description that she's applying for, right? If if there's like, I think 20% of she hasn't done something, right? So there's 20% of bullet points that she hasn't done, she wouldn't even apply for the job, right? For males,
I think it's close to 60%. There was a Hewlett Packard research, yeah.
Well, there you go. Or and it's like all of it. Where for males, there's like 25%. I think you're right. Like, because for males, it's like there's only 25% on the job description that they've done. They're like, yeah, I'll apply. And so it's just like, all I've always been saying, at least when working with females, who are predominantly my clients, going, just apply. Just for God's sake, apply. You look at the job and it resonates at least in some way, and the questions come in. It's like, nope, I'm not going to answer those questions. I'm just going to apply. So this is kind of, to me, it's like that continues. That really continues through work. I was a part of, like, my own personal experience was that, but I was actually lucky. I literally had 2 bosses, all males. One would say, no, you need to get more certifications and seriously more of this and more of that, and then you can become a director. And no joke, you guys, like 3 days later, when leadership changed, the other boss, who we were peers for a little bit, and I came to him about the HR director role, and he was like, yeah, you totally got this. And my critic came in. I was like, but I haven't done these parts of the job description. No joke. And he said, but it took that person and his belief at that moment in me. But now I know kind of, he said, these things that you think you've never done are actually be just teachable skills, like strategy, right? Or something like that. But people skills and reading the room and understanding emotional intelligence and actually having us all navigate it together as a team, including myself, because he was very low, and me listening to you, that's not a skill you can gain very easily at all. And so that was the moment when from that moment on, I also looked at jobs and hired people and be like, oh, this I can teach you, but this stuff I can't teach you.
Yeah, I think there was another research regarding these gender differences that female, they're judging themselves on the past success, on the things they have done already,
Yes,
and male, they're judging their future potential, what they can do in the future.
absolutely.
Yeah, we also
Absolutely.
need to judge
Well,
ourselves on our potential.
but that's the thing. That's the kind of the brain, and it's all mindset work. And
Yeah,
that's a lot of times people are like, well, how do you work? And it's like, it takes time. This work takes time. But the first thing is coming back to is the awareness. Do you hear that voice? The minute you can hear that voice, at least you have something to work with.
yeah. So how we can transform it in terms of job search? How we can implement this mindset?
So to me, it's back to that fake it till you make it. It's coming to the job description, literally, and kind of like the transferable skills, right? So you're
Yeah.
looking at the job description that you want to apply for, and you look at what you've done and you see what matches enough, like literally enough, which is whatever. Let's try it by 30%, right? And then again, you come back to the list of things you've accomplished that you forget, and you go, because sometimes people go, well, people skills or communication or strategy or crisis management. If you've been in any critical thinking or a crisis, like, natural disaster, or you moved a country, that's crisis management. Like, this is purely crisis management. But we never think about it this way, because you just moved the country because your partner was moving. And therefore, like, yeah, I just move with the partner. And then I set up the whole household and I do all those things because isn't everybody? And it's like, no, and it's crisis management.
Wow,
And
that sounds
so
so interesting.
it is, you know what I mean? Or like figuring out what are the systems in place in this country, you're in a different country with your family or you yourself can fit into and that you can benefit. That's literally like research. And again, is like navigating change with all the adversity, and it's resilience. These are the examples, but we don't think about that. And I can tell you,
Exactly.
as an HR director interviewing people, I always asked open-ended questions. I always ask people, give me an example where and then I connect it to the values, right? So when you apply for the job, and if that's the job you really want, look at their values of the company and write something in your cover letter about those values and how they resonate with you and why. That's first of all. Same thing, like I paid more attention to cover letters hiring people. I did personally. Well, because I could look like, I mean, I guess the final, but I could look and be like, did the person put some thought process into it? Again, don't overthink it. But if that's a job that you really want and you actually have a connection with somebody, so you kind of applying in a warm lead, I would put some thought in a cover letter in terms of you take the job description. That's another thing. And ChatGPT is a terrific tool. Seriously, use it. Use it for all the benefit. And take that job description and put those words, you guys, into that cover letter. People think and associate when they see similar things of what they're looking for. Speak their language. So just use same words. So when you're interviewing, look at the job description, use those words from their job description. If you need to adjust your resume to you could see what words they were using, use it. I know in LinkedIn, when you apply for a job through LinkedIn, on LinkedIn, it says, hey, these are the skills that you have. You have 5 out of 10 skills for this job. Look at the other 5 skills. I can guarantee you have them. They're just calling them a different thing. So don't like fill up your list of skills. Go in and like check them in. And then you could speak to it. And if you ever have a question, you could text me like, how would I speak to this skill? But that's the example of, and I didn't want exactly sometimes the work experience. I just wanted to see if the person connected what I'm asking with an example and what their values are. That's all I listen for.
That's a
Because the rest
great
will I can
example.
teach them.
Yeah, because sometimes people don't associate that the life skills they already have, it's not necessarily the job experience they
Yeah,
had in the
yeah.
past. Like, for example, you mentioned this crisis management. I will not ever think about this in this
I mean,
way.
if
That
you're a parent, you're in crisis management 24/7. Like I have a 16-year-old, which you will think, well, they're old enough. I'm like, you know what? You actually never know when that crisis comes, and it's a big crisis when it comes. And I was like, oh, thank God for all the crisis management, natural disasters I dealt in the, my previous job. But it's like, it's the same thing. It's absolutely the same thing.
that's cool. So let's focus on a couple of more
Yeah,
questions from
yeah.
our audience. So Tatiana, what would you suggest a professional must prioritize while navigating multiple uncertainties while interviewing for a company? Even
I think
US-based
US-based
companies,
companies,
companies
very in
vary in
culture, values, and
culture.
expectations. Yes.
Yeah,
So, what would you suggest professionals must prioritize while navigating? I
multiple
would say
uncertainties.
you, as a professional, as a person, I would prioritize your own values and what you require in the culture of the organization before you apply, and look for that. Because I mean, I think you're all listening to, you're incredible professionals, but if you don't pay attention to that and you're like, I just need a job, and you come into the culture with the company with culture and values that are the opposite of you won't last. That's a toxic environment. That's just, it's not gonna last. I mean, you might last at the expense of your health or your family or whatever else. There's always a price to pay. So to the best of your ability, if you can, I always go start with your own, like, values, just basic values, because they're fundamental. What are your life values, and kind of like just kind of what you live by, and then see what the company values are as you read them. Do they resonate, like, even a little bit? Do you have red flags? Pay attention to your intuition and your red flags. And when you interview with the companies, you're interviewing, they're asking you questions, so should you. I would always give credit to people that did research and ask questions, and ask interesting, intelligent, like curious questions that are asking. So you can ask questions about culture, like, how do you people deal with conflict here? And they go, oh, we have no conflict. That's a red flag, right?
Yeah, be true.
So that's, you find what matters to you as a person. And I always tell people, my clients and friends, have at least maybe two, maybe three, but two non-negotiables. Like, that's a non-negotiable for you, right? So for example, what would be non-negotiable? When people are talking about culture and they tell you, oh, like here, like we work all the time and we love that, and that's what we expect. I mean, that still exists, right? So like, you're supposed to pick up the phone when anybody calls, but that's how we are. We're super competitive about it, and you get the energy, you hear the message. If you value boundaries, because that's very clear lack of boundaries, if you value your time, if you value life outside of work, this won't work, like, at all. And so when you hear that, and a non-negotiable for you is that when you're done at 6 p.m., for example, you're done for the day, this will be a very clear thing that that's not what's happening in this culture and in this company. It's not right or wrong. You gotta listen, and then take like a responsibility and be like, oh, I heard it, but I didn't want to hear it. I did it, and then I got the job, and then I'm upset and resentful. That's not taking ownership and responsibility. Hopefully
Yeah,
that answers the question.
that's so powerful. You need to know your values and you need to protect your boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
That's very
Very
important.
much so.
But when
Absolutely.
we're looking for a first job, we are very tempting to get the first job we get. Yeah, so you need to be
but but
thoughtful and
but that's
thinking
that's
about
another part. If you know that you just want to get the first, if you're honest with yourself and be like, I just want to get the first job, so then I have something on my resume, but it doesn't matter, like, in a way, like in a certain area or expertise or industry, but I'm not going to get attached to it, and I'm not going to base my self-value and my worth, even if I have to leave it in 6 months, 9 months, doesn't matter. Do it, but be very honest with yourself why you are doing it.
And we have another question regarding the job. An imposter
Totally.
syndrome, can persist even after landing a job. What advice do you have for job seekers on maintaining confidence and self-assurance in their new roles?
Oh, this is such a great question. So because of actually this question and my own work with my clients, I'm actually starting an online 6 weeks course in November around confidence. It's called Confidence Catalyst. It's like this. It's when you land a new job, when you get promoted in a job, actually the imposter syndrome kicks in quite a bit. So that's a lot of the work that I actually do is in those moments, is that then a lot of women go, wait, am I in the right job? Do I fit? Like, did they pick the right person? And all of that stuff. So I look at it without like diving into the course, but do come, is there's several things. One, we work with imposter syndrome is it kind of go back to you've come here, you've landed this job for all of the reasons that you've accomplished things before this. So remember that. Another thing I remind, literally a client of mine last week, I said, they hired you for this job. It's not just on you. Like, did they hire the right person? It's like, hello, they're not completely like, they're intelligent people. Yeah, we all make mistakes. However, they hired you. It's a responsibility on both sides. Delegation, learning how to delegate, particular leadership positions, is a big piece. Communication is a big piece, and then back to like, Kate, what you were saying is boundaries, is learning to find who am I in this role, what's expected of me, what's mine, what's not mine. I call it swim lanes. What's my swim lane? What's not my swim lane? And that's a lot of times there's a lot of work is done there, particularly if you were promoted within the same organization and all the other jobs that you were doing before. There's a tendency to go, oh, I can just quickly do that. It's like, nope, that's not yours anymore. I need to stay here. If you want to keep going, just like what you were saying, if you want to keep seeing the beauty of your potential and keep going, then no, you're not doing something because you were good at this and you did it and it's faster. You've got to own that you're in a new position. Yes, it might require some new skills, then go get those skills. Pay attention to that. And don't jump into what you were doing before. So that definitely kicks in. So it's practice. It's practice. It's getting it, kind of shifting it by doing. You start doing, you chip away at small things. And remember to look in the mirror and go, I held a meeting. Seriously, like you held a new meeting in a new role and it was okay. It doesn't have to be great. It doesn't have to bunk. It's like, it was totally fine. Everybody survived. Nobody died. You go look in the mirror and be like, I was great. This was great today. It's all, I survived. Everybody's okay. It's all good. But do you see, like, it totally, it's humor that makes things lighter for sure.
That's true.
But which is always use humor with yourself and others for sure. But it's also rewiring your brain to be like, no, you did do a good job. We go through 10 meetings and by the end of the day, we're exhausted and we go, I didn't do anything. It's like, no joke.
Yeah, I was reading that some coaches, they are recommending to have a hype journal where you're writing down all your accomplishment, everything you've done. So if you can't notice it in your head, like if you don't have the self-awareness, just start to write it down. And you will see how much things you are doing actually.
But that's literally is the case to like, if you really are the person, and I was that person, I did not see honestly at all my accomplishments until I was like, sitting down every evening, and every evening I would write out 3 things that I did today that were well. And it's like, after a month or something of doing that, I was like, all right, I got it. I think. There's another, any advice?
Yeah. the last question from the audience, and there will be one more from me. So, any
Okay.
advice on beating imposter syndrome when you're building your own company? That's a great one.
Oh, that's a good one, because I went from a company, working for a company, to running my own. The advice I would give is just honestly keep going, one step in front of the other, because the fears are going to come in, the imposter syndrome is going to come in, and it's new. You're building your own company, but it's also amazing. You have the courage, seriously, to build your own company. There's millions of people that thought or action doesn't even cross their mind, or when it does, they're like, no way. So I want to really acknowledge you and congratulate you, like you're already doing it. But because it's new and because there's lots of things we don't know when we're building our own company, is seek help, ask for help, and seek help all the time. And it's like you're good at one thing, but you can't be good at bazillion things. But when you're building your own company, the expectation is, I had that expectation on me, that I'm supposed to know everything, because I used to know everything in my role. Or so it felt, you know what I mean? But I was also in my role for 16 years. And when it's something new, I go, what do you mean I don't know what I'm doing? How does this work? And so also remember, with imposter syndrome, the more we achieve in life, that's one thing about the high performance, but overall, the more we achieve, the harder when we do a new thing, the louder that thing is, because we're really competent. We've been so competent in so many things, and now it's like, huh? What do you mean I don't know how to do this? Oh, that is such a mind game. And so that's the part. Remember, if that pops up, then you could say, oh yeah, that's right, this is popping up because I'm really good and I did all of those things, and now it's really loud. So thank you, but you're not helpful right now. So that's
I love
hopefully is
it.
a little helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have just the last question from my side, because we
Wow, it's like
already run
40
out of
minutes.
time.
Jeez.
Yeah. Just remember yourself when you just arrived to the United States and you was looking
Mm.
for your very first job. What piece of advice you could give to yourself, and what other people, especially on dependent visa, should know?
Um, the piece of advice I would give myself. Um, I was lucky in a sense, because when I arrived to United States, I arrived to the university, and so I never worked outside of United States. So my first jobs finding them here were here. But though after university, I was having a really hard time actually finding my first job. And what I did do, I went to the temp agency, which is temporary employment agency. And I applied with them, and then they placed me in an administrative clerical role, even though I got the education here, blah, blah, like I didn't know anything about them. But that's actually what landed me, because it was a 3-month assignment or job. And it was that person who hired me in HR. And then I built the whole career in HR after that. So I think my advice is, don't be afraid to try different things, because there's different, and talk to different people. We tend to, I think, also when we come here, because you're away from your network and your support, we create support and network of not just like-minded, but kind of sameness, where they speak the same primary language. That breeds the same mindset, that seems to have the same, you know what I mean, the same tendencies or the same imposter syndrome triggers and stuff. So on one thing, it's great because it's similar, but meet other people, meet other cultures, other people in a similar path, but that they come from different countries than you. Because I can guarantee you there's other things about them, or they know, or they've done, that you have not. And people that speak the same first language have not. So expand yourself that way. And then also, kind of like the networking event, and just kind of listen. So I think, to me, a lot of times when we're in this place of, I don't know, but I will figure it out, we get really tight and really kind of attached to, like, I will figure it out, because, hey, we all did up until this moment. But there is this part of surrendering into putting it out in the universe. Here's the things I want. So maybe be a little specific, actually. So finding things of like, I want the culture that does, so you don't have to be like super rigid, but just give universe some seeds of what's important to you, and then let it know that you are available to listen. But then listen for, who do you meet on the street? Like, it doesn't even matter about the networking event. It's like, who are the connections? How are the people coming in your life? What do you need to do? Move. The part about it, go out, but first of all, physically move, engage. So don't sit at home by yourself in a new country. Get out. Not just meet new people, but move your energy, move your body, not just your mind. You know, it's like, so it's not stagnant and it's not draining. So you have to, that's the part that's on you. And in terms of the job seeking, is keep talking to people that might know the systems a little more, and finding ways of, whether it's the language or certain things. It's like, and don't be afraid, I mean, to, in some ways, to pay for some services that can get you somewhere faster. Like, I mean, like I paid a cut per se to the temp agency, right? But it's like, it's, if somebody can help you with a resume, or in some ways to help you change your mindset, you know, and see how your skills are transferable here, pay for that. It's a short-term thing for however long, but your growth is exponential that you can contribute later.
So basically, it's investing in yourself, because you're going to get the job faster, and you can support yourself faster.
Exactly. I would say that's probably what I would say. Yeah.
I love it. Thank you so much, Tatiana, for sharing
pleasure.
your experience. Yeah, and
absolutely,
please don't hesitate to drop your questions in the comments below. We can reply on those questions later after this live stream. And we have these live streams on a regular basis, so make sure you subscribe, give us a like, and share with your friends if it was helpful. Thank you so much for watching us today, and see you soon. Bye.
See you soon. Thank you so much.